Welcome back to our online viewers on the platform, the digital platform of the Energy Conference 2022. And it's a real pleasure to have in our studio the person who was just the chair of the panel that wrapped up in the main conference hall, Pria Narinesingh. It's good to have you with us. And the panel was really very interesting. Generation Next, who can we expect to see over the coming years leading the industry here in Trinidad and Tobago? Jumping off the panel, what were your impressions of this array of young talent?
Well, I think hello.
Let
me start there.
Again.
And good afternoon, right?
For so many years. It's a pleasure.
I think that for me, the first shocker came when I got the names for the panel. Because as I mentioned, we reached out to the CEOs in those companies and said, give us your next leader. We didn't say, give us your next female leader or male leader, and this is what came up. And I thought that was instrumental. Everybody was shocked. The chamber was shocked, the CEOs were shocked, everybody was shocked in terms of where we are. And I think that that in itself was quite encouraging, that women are making their way up, doing things in a sector that has been so predominantly male oriented, so that you can get to a place where among the many forms of diversity that are needed in today's world, you get that gender diversity, more things are going to happen, the ideas are going to come, the creativity is going to come.
Well, we often hear about young people, Generation Next, but yet for many years, traditionally, we see older heads holding on as long as they possibly can, in part because traditionally, the sector has been fairly steady. There's been a model about going about business, but on the panel, the word disruption was not used. I think chaos was used. But how do you see the way in which this new generation of leaders is talking about disruption and chaos leading to positive change, perhaps in comparison with some of the more senior executives you may come into contact with in your role as country head EY for Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean? What do you think that attitude is? Is it typical of industry across the board, or is this one of the first times
industry
you're
across the board? I've said this before, that I think age diversity is one of the biggest challenges that we face in the region. I think there's a timeline, right? I don't think that somebody should be a CEO for 20 years, or even, I don't know what the right number is, but you've got to be able to bring in fresh thought, fresh leadership if you want to cultivate those changes. And I'm not saying that somebody that has been a leader for 10 years doesn't move into another leadership position somewhere else and bring that change and bring that creativity. But I think that is something that in the Caribbean, we have been slower to respond than in the more developed world. And that can go broader for a number of things. If you look at the markets in the US, let's say, and you have a company that's consistently not performing for a while, that CEO is gone. In Trinidad or in the Caribbean, that doesn't happen as much. So I think that generation doesn't matter. I think that there's a timeline for leadership, and I think that has to turn over. I don't know whether it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, but that's the kind of range. And you'd find that there are a few younger leaders that take that approach. And when you see people changing jobs, it's because they believe in that. And that's how you get the fresh talent in. So, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, in terms of your overview, given your client base across different territories in the Caribbean, what is your sense of the energy transition being an imperative, not only within the oil and gas sector, but how is it affecting other businesses you may interface with? And I ask that because, as Hannah Supu said on the panel, it's a world problem. Therefore, it's touching, while the energy sector may be at the heart of some of the problems, it is in fact something that is affecting the human family across all spheres. Yeah. What do you see in the other islands?
It varies, right? So if you look at Barbados, the Prime Minister has been extremely vocal, and set laudable goals, etc., from an environmental perspective, but they come from a different space where they're not an oil and gas producer and they're a consumer. So the cost and the balance to individuals is significant, I was looking at something the other day and doing an analysis of the cost of living in Trinidad and the cost of living in Barbados. Trinidad prices have gone up so much when it comes to like food and stuff. They're kind of on par. But when you look at the cost of electricity and gasoline in Barbados compared to Trinidad, that's way higher, in terms of where that is. So their commitment has been there for a while. It's a part of a bigger
It's being
conversation.
driven by other factors than simply a question of the environment, but the
Yeah, there's the
realities of
financial
their
side,
economy.
whereas the oil and gas sector, up until 2014, 2015, drove our economy, yes. And then when prices went down, that also caused our economy to take a dive down. And that's what's brought all the financial foreign exchange issues and so on, because that $3 billion that we were earning, 3 billion US that we were earning in foreign exchange was no longer coming in, and so our will as a country may not have been the same, because we are a producer and exporter of those things, but there has to be a recognition of the global direction, and we've got to tack and increase our markets and relevance to keep, because we can't make what somebody doesn't want to buy. We've got to be able to change that and make what people want to buy to be able to sustain our economy. And that includes making the transition. But, the Prime Minister's speech this morning did cover a lot of that. And, the commitment, I think, is increasing as the momentum increases globally.
Thank you so much for joining us with your perspective. Is there anything as we wrap up that you might like to add in terms of, perhaps an area of some maybe regulatory framework or the speed of doing business? Is there anything you think is really critical at this point to flag as we start this energy transition and it's really becoming a broader national conversation?
I'd probably take from the panel, Fran, I would take it from the place of there needs to be some chaos.
All right.
And there needs to be some disruption, and we can't continue doing things the way that we did and expect a different result. It calls for different qualities in leadership. It calls for different skill sets.
Open-mindedness, embracing new ways of doing,
being prepared to be challenged, etc. All those points that were raised by that phenomenal group of younger persons who will be our next leaders.
Thank you very much, and it was beautifully moderated by yourself.
Oh,
you touched on many key areas, and I thoroughly enjoyed the way in which their views were brought out so clearly in different areas, from family life to dealing with matters like work balance post-pandemic and all of that.
It's real.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to see you once again.
Thank you.